Hello, welcome back to my channel. I'm Lena, this is Lena's Bookshelf, and we are gonna try to get my October wrap up done with what little daylight I have left. So here on the East Coast, it is getting dark a lot earlier because daylight savings time just ended. So hopefully I have enough light to crank this video out, but we're gonna talk about all of the books that I read during the month of October. And October, I feel like October flew by. Like usually I'm here saying like, oh my gosh, I don't even remember what I read at the beginning of the month, but October felt very short to me. That might be because the last whole week of October I had pneumonia, so I kind of lost that whole week, but anyways. So I'm just gonna talk about the books I read in the order that I read them. Seems like the easiest way to do it. So the first book I read was Just Like Mother by Anne Heltzel, and I read this because my friend Gwen has a podcast called Talk Bookish to Me, and she actually discussed this book on the podcast, so definitely go check out that episode. But this is basically a book about a girl who escaped a cult as a young child, and she finds again her cousin that was in the cult with her, and so then things go from there, kind of gets sketchy. There's definitely some cult vibes. I gave this one 3 stars because I felt like it was a little bit too out there for me. There was some scenes that were just overly gross for, I felt like, no reason. And I just couldn't suspend my disbelief enough to make this one really work for me. But if you definitely like cult thrillers, and if you're able to suspend your disbelief a little bit, then you might like this one. The next book I read was We Need to Talk About Kevin by Lionel Shriver, and I have since unhauled this book, so I don't still have my physical copy, but I ended up giving this one 2 stars, and which makes me so sad because that was one of my most anticipated books of the month. It's about a woman whose son committed a horrible crime and he's in jail, and the whole book is written as letters to her husband. And so the whole time you're trying to kind of piece together what happened in their relationship, what happened with the son's relationship, and she always had a very volatile relationship with her son. She never felt attached to him. So if you liked The Perfect Child, or if you liked The Push, you would probably like this one, but the same reason this didn't work for me is the same reason The Push didn't work for me, and I don't know, maybe I don't relate to it as well as I related to The Perfect Child. I'm not really sure what about this didn't work. I do know that the mother always seemed to push blame off on people, is kind of what I felt. And I also didn't like some of the terminology that they used. And this book was written in the early 2000s, and at that point, she should not have been using some of the terms that she was using. They just weren't politically correct. They were frankly kind of offensive, and so that kind of killed the mood of the whole book at that point. So for those reasons, I gave it 2 stars. Next, I read Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister, and I did listen to this fully on Audible. And this is a Reese's Book Club pick, so I should have known that going into it. What I've learned is that I never love a Reese's Book Club pick. They're always just kind of average. This is a story about a woman who sees that her son has murdered somebody on her front lawn, and she's devastated. She goes to bed and she wakes up and it's the day previous. And so every day she wakes up and it's the previous day. So she's going backwards in time to try and figure out who this person is that her son murdered. Why did he murder him? Is that actually what happened? And I felt like there was a lot of plot holes in the time travel element of this. It didn't really make sense. The non-realistic aspect of this wasn't explained enough. And I generally like time travel tropes in thrillers, but this one it didn't make sense. It wasn't explained enough. There was too many unanswered questions. The stakes didn't feel high enough. And at the end, when you had the whole resolution, you're just kind of like, oh, that's it. So it was just underwhelming. So I gave this one 3 stars. It wasn't a terrible thriller, but it definitely was forgettable. Next, I read A Mother's Reckoning by Sue Klebold. It is over there on my memoirs shelf. Frankly, I just can't be bothered to get up and get it right now, so I'll just put the picture on the screen. But this is a memoir written by the mother of one of the shooters of the Columbine High School mass shooting in 1999. And this was actually a reread for me. I had read it initially when it first published, and then my friend Jacqueline, this was the buddy read for her Patreon, and so I decided this is a perfect time to reread it, and once again, I gave it 5 stars. It is so impactful. It is such a great depiction of forgiveness process of understanding love for your child, loving somebody who has done something so horrible. And it was just so well done. Obviously, there is a little bit of bias. Some of the complaints I've heard about this book is that it felt like she was justifying what her son did, which I personally don't feel like that, but it definitely does feel a little bit one-sided, but I feel like that's to be expected because it is her son. She's still trying to protect him even in his death, and she talks about why and what led her to that point. I just felt like it was so well done and so impactful. Next, I read Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter, and please don't come for me in the comments, but I'm giving this one 2 stars. This book follows 2 girls, 2 sisters, and one of the girls, her husband is murdered in front of her, and after his murder, she kind of learns about this whole underground secret business that he has. And I don't know, maybe if I read this book when it first came out, I would have felt differently. I just feel like I've read this story before. It didn't feel like anything new or different. Honestly, I probably would have liked this better if it was like a Lucinda Berry story or something. I just feel like Lucinda Berry does stories like this better. And the older I get, the less and less I want to read about the horrific torture scenes like are in this book. Typically, I don't get triggered by things like that, but I just kind of found myself reading it and thinking like, why am I reading this? Now this is in my head and I don't really want to be thinking about this. So this one just really didn't work for me, and I did give it 2 stars. After that one, we have a huge win, and it is Big Lies in a Small Town by Diane Chamberlain. If you didn't know, Diane Chamberlain wrote one of my favorite books of the year, which is The Dream Daughter. And so when I read the synopsis of this, I was kind of intrigued, and I ended up giving this one 5 stars. It was so good. I just ate this one up. And this is kind of historical fiction, but it's dual timeline. So you have a timeline of the present day when a woman is tasked with refurbishing and cleaning and making new and making viewable an old mural. And she is tasked with this, and she's kind of not sure why she's tasked with this, and so she's trying to figure out why was I picked to do this. I don't restore art for a living. I'm just an artist. Why was I picked for this? So you're following that timeline, and then you're following the timeline of how the mural was made, which was in the 40s. It was a woman who came to the town to paint the mural as part of a competition. And she ended up basically they say she ended up going crazy. That's what everyone in the town says. So you're following her and how she was petitioned to make this mural and what happened, and then you're also following the current timeline. And this was just so good. There was so many different aspects of society and different aspects of culture, and this deals with so many different things in such a short book. I guess it wasn't short, but it felt so short. And it was just so good. I feel like I'm not doing it justice, but it definitely kept moving. I felt like I was on the edge of my seat to figure out what exactly happened. It had a great resolution, and it was just so good. So it definitely wasn't anything that I thought I would love, but if that interests you at all, definitely try it out. Or if you just like Diane Chamberlain's writing. And then after that, I was so excited by Diane Chamberlain that I decided to pick up Necessary Lies. And this is about a social worker in the 1960s in North Carolina who is a social worker for a very poverty-ridden area. And she befriends this teenage girl, and she's definitely trying to help this teenage girl get out of the kind of cycle of poverty that she is in. And she decides that I'm going to protect this girl no matter what the stakes. And this was really good. I just felt like it wasn't as hard-hitting and quick-moving, and it just left a little bit to be desired after Big Lies in a Small Town. I did give this one 3.5 stars, and I do think it was definitely worth it, but this felt more like women's fiction, or just not as much. It just wasn't as thrilling to me. Not that this was a thriller by any means, but this one had me on the edge of my seat, and this one was just fine. Next, I read I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy, and I also gave this one 5 stars. I definitely had a good reading month, especially with the memoirs. So if you have been living under a rock and haven't heard of this book, Jeanette McCurdy was an actress on the show iCarly on Nickelodeon, and she grew up on that show, and her mother died of cancer, and she got out of Hollywood and has written written a memoir about the abuse that she suffered while in the child actor industry. Abuse that she suffered both from Nickelodeon and from her mother. And she talks about her mother's narcissism and how it affected her and her family and how that led her to have a very unhealthy relationship with food. So definitely trigger warnings for eating disorders, things like that. But this was just so good. I had chills multiple times, and she is just such a good storyteller, and she narrates the audiobook, so I highly recommend the audiobook. And even at one point in the audiobook, she chokes up, and I'm so glad that they left that in there because it just shows how real and raw she was in this. And it also sent me on this deep dive into abuse that child actors had to overcome because of Nickelodeon, and I ended up going on a deep dive into the Dan Schneider fiasco and all of those scandals, and it just opened up a whole new world that I didn't even know existed. So definitely pick this one up. 5 stars, so good. And then the last couple books here we're going to get into is the books that I read for Thrill Till Halloween, which was the weekend readathon that I hosted with my friends Jacqueline and Olivia from Liv's Library. So definitely check out my vlog, definitely check out their channels. But the first book that I read for that readathon was our buddy read, and it was The Last Housewife by Ashley Winstead. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. And this is about a girl who was in a cult in college and got out of it when a friend committed suicide. And then now, years later, another friend that was with her in the cult has also committed suicide. So she joins forces with a friend who's a podcaster, and they try to figure out, okay, is this cult still happening? What happened to her friend? Did she commit suicide? Was she murdered? And this was really good. I felt like it definitely had some like dark academia type of vibes because it follows a lot of like when she was a student at the women's college, and it definitely has that podcast element. I wish that the audiobook had utilized that podcast element more. I think that's definitely a missed opportunity there, but I felt like this was, even though it was a little bit pretentious for its own good, I felt like it had a good messy ending, which I kind of like. After that, I read Comfort Me with Apples, and I initially gave this 2 stars, and I've now lowered to 1 star. So this is a kind of almost like a written in prose, very stream of consciousness short story about a woman who lives in like a very idealistic, almost like, it almost reminded me of like that movie Pleasantville or like Desperate Housewives, like very perfect little rich white neighborhood. And some strange things are happening that nobody's talking about. And the synopsis of this seemed really good, and the execution was just not. And the reveal of what was going on was, honestly, I felt like kind of silly. And yeah, this book just 100% did not work for me. And that's a shame because it's a cool cover and a cool synopsis. But yeah, definitely, nope, hard pass. Hard pass. And then the last book that I read for Thrill Till Halloween was The Family Game by Catherine Steadman, and I really enjoyed this one. This is about a woman who gets engaged to a man before she meets his family, and his family is this kind of rich old money family, and he takes her to their house for Thanksgiving, and they play this old German folklore type of scavenger hunt type of game. And they also play another similar game during Christmas time. So this book follows her getting to know her fiance's family between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And there's some secrets, and this is the rich family drama that I like. I keep saying I don't like rich family drama, but this is what I've been missing in other rich family drama books. I feel like this is what I was missing in Not a Happy Family by Sherry Lapina. This is what I was missing in The Hunting Wives. I just really enjoyed what this book did and where it went. So 4 stars, highly recommend this one. Definitely look into it. Okay, that was all of the books that I read in October, and it's a good thing because the sun is completely set now. So let me know down in the comments if you've read any of these books and what you thought about them. And also let me know what was your favorite book in October. Please hit that subscribe button. It really helps out my channel, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.